I want to welcome everyone to the show. My name is Jodi Taves. I'll be hosting today. I am the owner of Explora Creative, and today we are talking to Sandra Beatty of Websites That Convert, and we're going to be talking about how to write for your website. I feel like a lot of health professionals, they really don't want to come across as feeling like salesy or pushy because they're dealing with people that are, in pain. They're already maybe feeling vulnerable. There's also this element of wanting to, sound professional on your website as well. So A, we're trying not to be too salesy or pushy, and B, we want to sound really professional and, sound smart, essentially. Um, how do you go about navigating that, or how do you create a website that still creates trust and credibility, but doesn't feel salesy or doesn't sound over professional, right? Like we don't want
Yes,
to use clinical language. Can you speak to that?
100%. I'm so glad you said that. Stop using clinical language.
I will
Unless
shout on
you're
that soapbox
talking
all
to
day.
doctors or other clinical people, and that's your audience. But if that is not your audience, absolutely don't use, the language you talk to another associate with or colleague.
Mhm.
So that's where using the words of your potential clients or your demographic, your target audience, using their words. How do you describe what they're experiencing?
Right.
And they're not going to describe it in a clinical way, right? So, and when you use that kind of language, the language that how they will describe it, then you're automatically creating a connection with them. And it's not going to be salesy. They're just going to, that's exactly what I'm thinking or what I'm saying. So it doesn't come across as salesy at all. And the other important part is to empathize with it. So your audience may have heard of the story brand framework. It's a great framework to follow. I think you're familiar with it,
I'm
Jodi.
familiar with it. I'm not sure my audience would be familiar with it, but I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. So Donald Miller's story brand framework is a great framework to follow
Mhm.
to exactly that. Avoid being salesy. It's where you're speaking to them in a way that you are first identifying their problem and how it makes them feel. And then you're leading them into a solution and presenting yourself as a guide. So even in that structure, it's about them. Your website, absolutely, and all of your marketing material, anything you're saying has to be about the person you're
Yeah.
trying to. It's not about you. You don't talk about how amazing you are and how you have X, Y, and Z behind your name and all that stuff.
Yeah.
People, honestly, we know this. Hopefully, we admit it about ourselves. Is it's what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? And that's the question they all have in their mind. So it needs to be the copy, the website, marketing material needs to be talking about their problem, how it's making them feel. And
Mm.
you know that this is really what you're looking for and the kind of transformation you want to have, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And then near the end of all of that, bring in yourself to
Right.
assure them that you're credible, you're competent, and you can help them achieve X outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, following that framework gets rid of that salesiness and that putting me first, but instead putting your demographic first.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a much more empathetic way of looking at it, where you're like, what is your problem? Kind of studying their problem so that you really are aware of, what's going on, how they talk about it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
something that we always talk about with our clients as well, is like, it's not patellofemoral, it's knee pain, like
Yes.
but I also feel like that sometimes, I mean, you can maybe challenge that too, depending on where your clients are coming from. If they're
Yeah.
coming from a doctor's office and they've already had a diagnosis and then they're coming to see you for that diagnosis, I mean, you could challenge it, but that's where doing your customer research, I think, is really valuable. Is like how are they actually talking about that problem?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think that's something I'm always like, in your intake form, how do they describe their problem to you? Is it like, my doctor told me I had this condition and I'm looking for, help with that? Or are they saying, like my knees are creaky and grindy and I can't go down the stairs or I can't tie my shoes without my knee hurting, like things
Yeah.
like that, it's just like, how are they talking about that problem? And you can get a lot of that information,
You can.
especially when you have one-on-one time with your patient, like they're going to tell you that.
And that one-on-one time, actually, that's a really great point to bring up because you would have the opportunity to get deeper into the issue.
Hmm.
And I think even when you brought up the point about my knees are creaking or whatever, there's always an underlying concern to that. What does that mean in your life?
Mm,
Means that I'm going to have difficulty getting up and down the stairs and I can't afford to move. I can't afford to whatever. Or it means that I can't do the activities I used to really enjoy doing that or even, playing with my grandchildren or whatever. Like there's always that they're not going to say initially. They're not going to say those things right off the bat. But when they're in, a consultation or they get to know the doctor, they may disclose that kind of concern when they feel safer to do so.
yeah.
So, and that's something actually you do want to talk about on your website. So you don't want to necessarily leave it as these surface symptoms, but
Mm,
what are the deeper issues? What is this? How is this really affecting their life?
right. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
speak to the positive outcomes. I think that's one of the things that maybe always feels a little bit sale or can feel salesy is when you're talking about their problem all the time instead of maybe flipping it and looking at the like, but what is the positive outcome when their knees stop hurting? It's like
Yes.
speaking to that as well, which again, they may not tell you. You might have to kind of dig deeper and
Yes.
make some guesses from time to time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You don't want to leave them in pain. You do want to
Mhm.
come up and present the solution. And that's where that's where the transformation
Oh
takes
yeah.
place. And that's when they go, oh, so you can help me with this because this is what I'm really looking for. I don't want to
Right.
stay here, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
you definitely want to bring them through to that outcome that they're really looking for.
Yeah. And it gets like you said, it's like it gets them nodding their head too, being like, that is me. Like
Yeah.
it's so important that they can see you as a solution. Like I find it's so important that they can see you as a solution because if you're always speaking in very clinical terms, they don't know that you can help them.
Yeah.
And it just does a disservice to your potential clients if they don't know that you're a solution and you could have an impact on their life and that deeper impact that maybe they don't talk about on the surface, right?
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes when we use the clinical terms, it feels like you're talking above them and you're not making a connection with them at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like, oh, I'm going to have 5 minutes in your in your office and you're going to kick me out and move on to the next person.
Right. Yeah.
And
Feels a bit
people need
cold.
to feel, yes, they need to feel like you're really listening and hearing them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's important to kind of avoid using a lot of, clinical terms. Just take it
Yeah.
down to the level they understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, where can people find you online? So, you have a YouTube channel. There's some other places you live online. If people want to get more information, plus you have some really great like practical advice, like tips on YouTube. Tell us about that. Where can we find you?
Yes, so I'm really only active on LinkedIn.
Mhm,
I have my own website, sandrabeatty.com,
mhm.
and I have a YouTube channel. You can just search Sandra Beatty, it will come up there. And I do have every Friday, almost every Friday of the year. Usually they're in like 3 month increments
Yeah.
of something called Conversion Express. And it's just a 15-minute live webinar where I teach one concept for people that it's meant to be simple, doable, and actionable immediately on your website, just to help get more conversions from your website. It's all these little tweaks that you make that can
Wow.
help get better conversions.
And I've watched those. They're great. They are really like very to the point, super practical, super insightful, and so fun because they're actually on like live websites. So they feel very real.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Awesome. Well, Sandra, thank you so much for being on the show. All the links that we have will be included, like all the links to your channels. We'll include those in the show notes. And I just wanted to thank everyone for watching and being here. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you found this valuable. And make sure you go check out Sandra's content on YouTube and her Friday sessions because they are very, very awesome.
thank
Um,
you.
so thank you.
And thank you for having me, Jodi.
Oh, my pleasure.